Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be doing an alcohol ink piece on this photocopy color photo paper. There's a shiny side, there's a dull side. I'll be working on the dull side, but I'll be adhering the paper to this Lazy Susan, which I've covered in press and seal to protect it. And I'll be adhering it by the shiny side. So I'll use Scotch tape for that. I've made 4 little loops, one for each corner of the shiny side of that color photo paper. And I will be doing a video in the future because I've not tried it yet using the shiny side of the photo paper, but I'll start with the flat side. That's the one that most people have told me about. And I'm also going to use this Tim Holtz alcohol ink applicator. There's a little cotton piece that comes on the applicator, clean one, and I've also got paper towel just to clean myself up. Rubbing alcohol, which is isopropyl alcohol. This is a 91%. I recommend that or higher percentage of alcohol. And there's a mini mister. And I have a little dispensing bottle in the background, which I've also held up for you to see. That allows me to dispense a bit of alcohol at a time. And my little travel dryer, 2-speed, high-low. I wish it had a cool on it, but it's not that hot, but just enough to move things around. The ink I'm using today is going to be Sandal and Sepia and Espresso, and that's in the order of lightest to darkest for this particular project. And so I start by putting some of the isopropyl alcohol on the photo paper, again flat side for this particular technique. And the reason I do that in this case is because what I've found from experience is that the darker inks, not necessarily the Sandal, but certainly the Sepia and the Espresso, as well as any of the dark alcohol inks, has a tendency to stain the page wherever you place the droplets, unless they're on alcohol already. So that's why I've put a little bit of alcohol down, spread it around, and you could do one color at a time if you wanted to. In this video, I'm doing 3 colors at a time. It worked out perfectly fine, but it's entirely your own preference. So I'm really just going to put those in random places, but trying to keep them on top of where there's already some of the rubbing alcohol or the isopropyl alcohol. And I'm just moving it around manually a little bit, which you don't have to do. You could just simply pick up your travel dryer or whatever your tool is. Please don't use a heat tool. This is alcohol, an alcohol ink. That means it's flammable. You'll have not only the possibility of starting a fire, but you'll probably scorch the paper or burn it or warp it. Heat tool is just too much to have for this particular technique, because as you'll see as we go here, I have it aimed at the paper for quite a long time, certainly longer than you would ever have it aimed at anything if you were doing any heat embossing, for example, which is in very short spurts. So really the first step, and it's going to repeat 2 or 3 times at least, is to move those inks around, let the particles of pigment from the inks move and get light in some areas. They'll deposit and get dark in other areas. And I'm just going to pick up the isopropyl alcohol, put on a few manageable drops, because I really don't want this stuff to be flying all over off of my page if I can help it. I don't like to waste the ink. There's a little bit that came off, and that's why I have a paper towel around, just to kind of stop it from going all over the place. Although again, alcohol ink dries extremely quickly, so it's not going to go far, but I'm a bit stingy, so I try not to have it go off the page. And as you'll see, I'm using the Lazy Susan to my advantage. I'm trying to keep the nozzle of the dryer aimed away from me, and that's because there are fumes coming off of the alcohol. Very dangerous to be breathing them in. They might not kill me if I use them or do this just once without the proper conditions, which I'll explain in a minute, but over time they can certainly harm me. And it's not just my lungs, it could be my eyes. It's also isopropyl alcohol fumes are very dangerous to other people in your home, animals in your home, and so on. So you can't hear it here. You won't hear the hair dryer. You will also not hear the air exchange systems that I have going behind me, and you won't hear the birds that are outside the door that is open in my studio either. But all of that is going on while I'm creating this piece. And then in the editing process, what I do is I remove all those sounds and do my narration over top. So that's why you don't hear any of it, but it tells you a little bit about the kind of precautions that I have going. I could certainly be wearing a respirator as well, and I would support that if somebody wanted to wear a respirator or thought that it was a good idea. And the very best thing to do is to do this outside. It's not always practical for us to do these things outside, so I'm giving you all of the considerations that you should think through before you decide that this is the kind of project you want to undertake in your home. You may have another studio, for example, or somewhere else that you can be doing this type of technique if you think it might be of danger to your the other people in your home or your pets or what have you, particularly people with birds. And I won't go to a great long thing, but I will say that birds, if you're not aware, and you have them, have a very different breathing system than humans and dogs and cats. It's a very weak system, and alcohol fumes could be very, very harmful to them very, very quickly. So just keep all that in mind, please. And as you'll see, as I said earlier, I've really been going over and dropping drops, very manageable drops of alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, onto the piece. And then I'm looking at it at the same time and trying to decide, do I need those inks to move around a bit more? And I guess in this instance, the answer to that would be yes, because I'm adding a few little drops here and there of the alcohol. Well, more than a few. I would just caution you again to keep it manageable, because you don't want them going all off the page. It can become very annoying and very wasteful. And I also noticed as the colors were breaking down, and again, these are browns, but they break down and there's a mild pink kind of purple that breaks out as the alcohol breaks the colors down. And that would have been a color that contributed toward making probably the sepia or the espresso. So I added a bit more of the espresso with the alcohol in order that I could cover up some of those pinkier places, which I didn't really want in a, if I'm going to be using this particular piece to represent coffee or cola or whatever it is that I'm going to have it do. I don't want little pink and purple pieces in there, particularly. I mean, it's not horrible if they're there, but the smaller the better. So this, by the way, is an 8.5 by 11 sheet. The beauty of this particular substrate, this photo paper, is that it does not have to be taped down the way that vellum does, because vellum tends to curl up a bit. This does not curl up in my experience at all. And again, you'll see that I try minimum amount of heat, which does have the effect of curling, but I also want the dies to go right to the very edges of the page, so I can use the entire piece when I break it down into projects. And that could be greeting cards, it could be art pieces that I have framed. I may use these to die cut other things, again, as representations of, who knows, it could be coffee, it could be Coca-Cola over ice. Some people have mentioned on other pieces that I've done similarly, so we'll just see how this turns out. And again, I've stopped and added a little bit more alcohol, and I'm dropping a drop or two of the espresso and just allowing that ink color to move around and to make some more interesting shapes, and just to deposit that the colors in various places, kind of make it look interesting. And pretty soon I'm going to be done with this part of the technique, although I'm sure if you wanted to, and I've done it myself, you could go on for a great long time doing this. Really what I was after with this particular piece was to get as much contrast, and you can see there's a couple of dark dots at the bottom that I'll probably want to get rid of here. And so what I've done to get rid of them, as it were, what I've done here is I've decided that I like the contrast of the dark and light, which is really what I was going after. And I'm taking that alcohol tool with the little cotton piece on it. I've applied some of the isopropyl alcohol, and I'm daubing it all over, and which has the effect of creating little white places that look like little bubbles and some larger bubbles. And it's also picking up the ink from one area and transferring it to another. And I'm turning that little handle in my hand as I'm doing it so that it's really, really random. I'm not touching every single place on the image, although you could certainly do that. I'm trying again to get some real contrast, not only in colors, light and dark, but I'm also trying to get some contrast in the textures. So in this instance, I'm going to have some areas that are very tiny little bubble looking images, and I'm going to have some that are larger looking. And in a moment, I just put the tool down, I'll give you an idea of where we're at. That's given it quite a bit of texture. And so I take a look. Sometimes I photograph it, take the photograph away, play with it a bit, see how it looks. In this case, I don't have the luxury of doing that because I like to do all one take. And so I've taken that mini mister, and that has the effect of, unlike the tool, well, it makes the droplets, they're much larger droplets. So I'm holding the dryer way up in the air now, and that has the effect of drying the ink as quickly as possible in the place that it has landed, the pigments. So I want those big bubble sort of images to stay, and again, a contrast to all the tinier ones that I've just put in with the alcohol ink tool. And so there you have a pretty good idea of what the end piece is going to look like. There are some shiny areas, those are not wet, that is just the alcohol ink. And that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for joining me.